All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Arlen Monday. Arlen with more dental work this week, and then we'll return probably to the Tuesday slot. And Arlen, I appreciate your flexibility. I really do. I mean, I know I guess you could say I was flexible since I'm doing the program today with you on Monday, but personally, I do like having you as a co-host any day, but especially Tuesday. So I appreciate that you're flexible and able to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
So by the way, things Hal, good. Go ahead. I'm going to step back. Go ahead. What were you saying?
At the introduction, what I noticed is I didn't hear any music like I usually do. Is that what you wanted?
Well, we started it. I actually had the clock going first, but then I did put music in the background, and you may have missed it. But yes, there was music. I think you should hear it because... No, you know what, Arlen? Thanks for what happened was I had it muted, I think, for part of the time. I'm not sure, but in any event, yes, we did play the background music at the end. You may have missed it, but it did play.
Well, as long as we're talking and people can hear us, that's the most important thing.
Well, I think they can. I can actually go live and check, but I'm pretty certain because I see those levels going, and usually that means that we're broadcasting. How are things in Vermont? It's been really nice weather here for a change. Cool, pleasant. I assume it's even better where you are.
It's been very nice. It's been somewhere in the 70s almost every day. Rained a little bit the other day, but this I can live with it. It's more like where I live in Monterey. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'll take it.
Good news, Arlen. While you were speaking, I was listening with one ear. The other ear, I did boost the volume from the stream, and I could hear us talking. So, in fact, we are going out to the masses, to the 2 or 3 folks who listen live. Maybe it's more than that. We'd love to see the numbers rise. And one way you can help us with that is to subscribe. Subscribe now. Let's see, right there. I'm going to put the subscribe button. You can click. You can ring the bell. Also, don't forget, we're on Facebook on a regular basis. Well, 24/7 basis, I guess, is what I would call regular. So you can join Halitics on Facebook anytime. We'll certainly respond to you. Got some nice comments recently. Would love to hear what you have to say about those. And
if I may say,
yes, Arlen.
If I may say that, there may not be a lot of people listening to us live, but certainly a lot of people do come back to it in YouTube and listen to it. Sometimes we've had some very impressive numbers after the fact.
It's true. The numbers have been going up, and we continue to work on that, including the subscriber base. Would love to get to that 1,000 number. Of course, once we get to 1,000, I'm going to start pushing more. We're going to talk about some of the other YouTubers who are in the same space that I'm in and why you might prefer. Arlen, I think, agrees with me. A recent expose of the payment practices to some self-described progressive podcasters may call into question their objectivity, which would be a good reason for you to subscribe to Halitics and go to Halitics for your news. Arlen, real quick, we'll get to all the big stories. You were very helpful with some good ones too, and I appreciate that, especially from the New York Times. But I do want to center, as I do invariably, the victims as I see it, and I don't think I'm the only one, of empire, of power imbalances, of militarism. And the worst place on earth is Gaza. One thing that brought that home to me was getting into an online debate with somebody about whether there's a, quote, genocide, unquote, against trans people. This was a point made, and I pushed back hard. I said that is not a helpful way to frame the attacks on the trans community. I defend certain, I think there are certain areas where trans communities are treated badly, and we certainly need to address that. But it's not a genocide. They're not being killed. There's no plans to put them in camps or bomb them or kill them. It's not the same. And I did a little research. The only genocide that is considered right now emergency level in the world, according to genocidewatch.com, I don't know, I assume they're some sort of experts, is Gaza. There are other areas places in Africa where there's real worry, places in Southeast Asia, I believe Myanmar, where there's real concern. But the one place on the planet which is considered right now a genocide emergency is Gaza. So that is the ground zero.
I've heard Sudan is kind of prominent too in Africa, that they're really going through a lot of loss of lives and maybe some genocide going on. So yeah, it's like nothing new, but that's certainly the worst that we've seen in a long time, what we see in Gaza right now.
Yeah, Arlen, what you mentioned about Sudan, Darfur, Congo, terrible killing fields there, and I may have missed something. I'm not trying to be certain in my commentary. From what I saw on Genocide Watch, right now Gaza is considered the worst. If that's accurate, if I'm correctly reading what Genocide Watch is saying, it may in part be because the situations in Africa, as bad as they are now, were even worse in the late 20th century, in the late 1990s, early 2000s. We saw higher rates of death, and we saw more clearly targeted efforts to wipe populations out, which we're apparently not seeing to the same degree. That doesn't mean things are good or we want to be there, but it's always a matter of degree. And I hate to even do that, compare atrocities, compare horrors, but it was more for the point of why we're focused here on Halitics, partly because it's the U.S.'s involvement, Israel's involvement, and also because it is just that bad.
And if I may say something else, I've been hearing the last few days that apparently Israel's getting more and more aggressive, that they're pushing harder, they're going on more offensive, military actions, and they're disallowing, aid and food to that area. And from what I understand, it's getting worse.
Yeah, have heard the same exact point, Arlen. Thank you for sharing that. There had been what Israel was calling humanitarian pauses on a daily basis. They've stopped those. In other words, where they would say, well, we're not going to be dropping bombs. We're not going to be firing, with machine guns or with high-powered rifles during this hour where you can go get food. Now, of course, they often violated that commitment, that so-called pause, but they also sometimes lived up to it. Now they've taken that off the table, and the death count consistent with that terrible scenario that we're talking about has actually gone up daily recently. So we're seeing even more deaths per capita. Over the total number of dead went up over 500 over the weekend. We see, and now part of that, Arlen, as I understand it, is due to some bodies that were found in the rubble that we were not previously counted, that may have been killed months ago, even years ago at this point. But I believe over the 3 days, we've also seen over 300 new bodies brought in to hospitals. We see 532 additional Palestinians since Friday, and that's over 11,400. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what is most disturbing, I think, is there's nobody around to tell Netanyahu, no, you can't do that. There's the United States apparently is washing his hands of any direct involvement there. So Netanyahu seems to be able to do whatever he wants. And, like Trump, in a lot of ways, he's going to go for the maximum.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible situation. I don't know how to. Yeah, I mean, and Israel, again, and you mentioned Netanyahu, clearly completely out of control, launching a raid against Yemen, killing the Houthi-run, the government's prime minister there. Just terrible. And their defense as well. They were sending missiles at us. That's what you're doing. The Houthis were trying to protect, to the extent they possibly could, the Palestinian people that you're wiping off the planet. I don't know what to say, Arlen. This is one of the most depressing news stories I've seen, most depressing developments since that I've been cognizant, that I've been conscious.
Yeah, obviously there's opposition to what he's doing in Israel, but I don't know how much power that has or much difference that makes. It's kind of like in the U.S. There's a lot of people against what Trump is doing, but there seems to be no way of changing that. And I imagine the same situation is like that in Israel. That there's a lot of opposition, but they don't have a way to get rid of Netanyahu.
Well, they keep giving him a plurality of the votes when they do have elections, and he's able to build coalition governments. It's true he hasn't gotten 50% of the actual vote in recent elections the way Trump has, but he gets enough votes that he can build a coalition. I think it's giving the Israelis a little too much to claim that they're opposed to Netanyahu or they don't like him. It's clear they want the hostages released, and Netanyahu's policies have endangered the hostages and in many cases led to their being killed. That said, and often by Israel, not just by Gaza, not just by Palestine. But that said, there seems to be very, very little sentiment, and public opinion polls consistently show very, very little sentiment in support of the actual Palestinian lives that are being lost. The Israeli people have, by a significant majority, said consistently they don't care what happens to Palestinians. They don't care if they're cleared out. They don't mind ethnic cleansing. They don't have any sympathy for the people there.
And not only that, Netanyahu has been especially successful in doing all the things, doing offensively against taking out Iran and everything he does. He seems to they've got the best military around, so they're able to succeed in what they want to do. So that certainly will help his popularity.
Well, they have the most powerful military in the region because they have our weapons, because we give them our weapons, and we also make it much more inexpensive for them to purchase because we're underwriting their debt. If they fail to pay the money back that they borrow, we actually have pledged to provide security. So Israel has a lot of advantages that the other countries in the region don't have. Unless the U.S. changes its policies, this will not change. This will continue to become, ever worse. And it's already as bad as anything we've seen, at least in 80 years.
And it doesn't seem there is any possibility of changes in the U.S. government. So, it's going to continue for a long time, unfortunately. You always, I think, Arlen, when you point fingers at what's happening now, do point it at Trump. Do you think the Democrats, A, are doing anything to try to stop Trump, and B, could they do anything to try to stop Trump? Well, I think there's some of them that certainly have spoken out against what Israel is doing, but I don't know that the majority have, or that they decided on a plan for the entire party. So unfortunately, I don't see anything happening, especially when they're not in power.
All right, we'll get into that conversation a little bit later in the show, why Israel, or why the Democrats have failed, certainly in my opinion, by and large, with several exceptions, to take a principled stance against Israel, and why institutions have failed as well. With that, let's get to the first story. Arlen recommended this. This is Jamel Bouie. He's a New York Times opinion columnist. He has been one of the most harsh critics of Trump in that paper, which is saying something because the paper is remarkably anti-Trump. Even their conservative columnists tend to be anti-Trump. What stood out? I gave you the first paragraph here. Why did Bowie's column speak to you, Arlen, if it did?
Well, he pretty much summarized the situation, namely that Trump thinks he owns the entire government. He owns everything. He could do whatever he wants with any agency and any part of it. And so far, he's been able to do that, unfortunately. He thinks that the Smithsonian, it's up to him to change the policies of the Smithsonian. Washington, D.C., he figures he can do whatever he wants there. And just about, anything else, Trump, and of course it's really awful what's happening with health research, science, and all that. Those are things that pretty much whatever Trump wants, Trump gets, and a lot of them are very harmful, I think.
Why? I mean, I don't know where to go with this because I agree with that. I do think a lot of what Trump is doing is terrible. So yes, and the answer I come up with consistently is we have to build a political opposition to him because, as Bowie even suggests, a lot of voters don't really care that much. And I'll give you an example. In D.C., I don't like the fact that the National Guard or state guards now are patrolling the streets. I don't like it at all. But residents there, they may not like it either particularly, but one thing they do like is crime rates have dropped. It is safer in D.C. right now. And so I don't quite know what to do with it. If Trump is pursuing a policy that we broadly agree is bad, but that it has some positive ramifications that make it acceptable to a significant percentage of voters, what's the appropriate political response?
Well, I think this is just a temporary offense, by the federal government, bringing in federal soldiers and all that. They can't do that all the time, and it's way too expensive and not realistic. They got to take the soldiers and get them back, fighting wars, which is what they're, trained to do. So,
well, excuse me, let me just interrupt. They're state guards, so they're homeland based. They tend not to be deployed overseas, and we're not fighting any wars right now, so they wouldn't be sent overseas until there was need by the U.S. military, which isn't, again, fighting wars as far as I can tell, though we are providing some support to Ukraine and I guess Israel, terrible, in my view, terribly, but we are. So, I mean, it is expensive, though. It's very expensive. The New York Times had a good article about that today, saying that some of the red state governors who have sent in their guard, Arlen may be rethinking that in light of the fact that they have significant crime problems in their own cities, like Memphis, St. Louis, I mentioned, New Orleans, I believe Birmingham and Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi are very dangerous cities, extremely high crime rates. Cleveland, Ohio. Why don't at some point the red state governors may want those guardsmen and women in their cities protecting their citizens?
That's when they're going to have to come up with a good answer, because so far they've been unable to do that. It's always been blue states with Democratic governors, and it's just not, and they're pretty much ignoring all those other states that you mentioned, the red states that actually have a lot worse crime rates in some of them, in Mississippi, Alabama, Oklahoma, lots of places like that. So. Yeah, they're going to have to come up with an answer and, maybe move some of these, move to get some of these troops into red states. And we'll see how that goes.
What's the value? Again, I have a lot of problems with what I've talked about this quite a bit. You can see here, relative to the worst of the Trump, this is from Bowie's piece, relative to the worst of the Trump administration, the destruction of the nation's capacity for, then this is, he identifies what I guess Bowie thinks are the worst things Trump's done, destroying our capacity for scientific and medical research. I think he has a good point. That's really bad. Even worse, in my opinion, yes, indiscriminate arrests of immigrants by roving bands of masked agents. I do not like having thugs, armed thugs, government backed, Gestapo basically, or SS troops in our streets. I can't stand that. And his baseline lawlessness, right? He doesn't give a crap what the courts say. There's clearly not any respect for the judiciary. So I think these are all really good points by Bowie. I wish he had mentioned first Israel, because that to me is the worst of all things that Trump is doing, just as it was equally awful what Harris Biden did. But he doesn't. Do you think that's because he really doesn't care what Trump's doing in Israel? Or do you think it's because the New York Times has consistently embraced a pretty it has been unwilling, shall we say, to take on Israel. Do you think Bowie's just catering his message to his employer, or do you think he really doesn't care about what's happening in Israel very much?
I suspect he cares, but unfortunately, you don't see that issue anywhere almost. It's like pretty much forgotten or ignored. Nobody's willing to take on Israel or the Trump administration about that. So, things just go on as they have gone on, and unfortunately, and, I wish there was some blowback somewhere, but there doesn't seem to be.
Do you think that's a mistake of the new? Let's assume it's either Bowie or whoever's made the decision, the editorial decision not to discuss Israel's crimes, at least in columns and not as explicitly as say we do here. Is that a mistake? Is that going to cost these media outlets or the party? Do you think they're reading the room incorrectly?
No, they're probably safe. I mean, they're wrong, but they're safe. No, who's going to go up against them? The Trump administration is happy with if it's ignored, and so I don't think they have much to lose by ignoring that particular issue.
You don't think their credibility is somewhat compromised, that fewer... I do. I personally think this does hurt the New York Times. I think that fewer and fewer people respect it. I know a lot of people just, if it's not in the New York Times, they don't care, or it doesn't impact on their view of it. I can't help but believe that a lot of the reason we're seeing traditional media's role, its influence drop, is because it clearly... not just when it comes to Israel, but in so many other areas, seems weak, seems flaccid, seems willing to bend the knee to power.
Yeah. You and I both would like to see more of that coverage and, disagreement with Israel and what's going on, but, it just isn't talked about very much. And unfortunately, the major media, has bent and surrendered to Trump in a lot of ways. So, they're not really an opposition press like there has been in some eras. Mostly they report on everything that the Trump administration says, but they don't really take it on, other than maybe the New York Times. So, it's a very sad situation.
Well, Bowie does take it on in his piece. He just takes on only some aspects of the Trump administration's actions, not others. I'm glad he didn't mention tariffs, by the way, because, I think the tariff policy that Trump has somewhat embraced is better than what we've had before, but his employment of it is very weak. Let me ask you this, Arlen. What's your main takeaway from Bowie's piece? Is there... he basically lists a lot of bad things that Trump's doing, as I understand it, that we've discussed. Is there, I'm just, is there a call to action? Is it enough to just tell us how bad Trump is, or should he be doing more? Does he do more?
Well, I think he does a good job of laying it out on the line and telling us what the problems are, but he doesn't have any solution for them. And frankly, none of us do, because, Trump has all the power. There's nobody there to stand up to him. Democrats don't have any power. Really, the only way things are going to change would be maybe the 2026 midterms, but that's a long way away, unfortunately. And, the 2028 presidency, and that's a long way away. So for a long time, Trump is going to do whatever he wants, and he continues to do whatever he wants, and often makes things worse and worse. And I think, Bowie is telling us all the terrible things he's doing, and they're not going to be the only terrible things he's doing, unfortunately.
So you mentioned the 2026 midterm, so that's next year. They're coming up. But it is a long way off. And of course, the new Congress won't come into power until 2020, I believe the beginning of 2027, maybe the very end of 26. Are you optimistic at all? And I'm going to give you, I've got a video here where Harry Enton just talks about just how the Democratic brand is completely in the toilet. Registration levels are dropping for Democrats at a much faster rate than they are for Republicans. On the other hand, I heard Crystal Ball say that she thinks the Democrats will do okay because the party out of power, out of the White House, always does better in midterms, and Trump is very unpopular, which he is. Trump's policies are unpopular, and I think the American public probably does want something else. Is that desire for something different, which I think is extraordinarily rational, sufficient to overcome their strong dislike for the Democratic Party, which is also, in my view, extremely rational?
Yeah, as far as there being any changes, I'm not optimistic because I don't think anything's going to really happen. And, the fact that the out of power party does better in off-year elections may be true, but we don't know what Trump and MAGA people are going to do regarding the states and their elections and the gerrymandering, and it's just not a normal time. So we can't be sure of anything that the Democrats will really have a fair choice or a fair chance.
Well, does it also bother you? And I agree with you. There's certainly, like, the gerrymandering in Texas is very worrisome. You hear, for example, Governors Newsom and Moore talking about gerrymandering further. Maryland, which is a very gerrymandered state, they can only squeeze out one more Democratic seat. In Maryland, since it's, I believe, 7 or 8 to 1 right now, 7 to 1 Democratic, so it would only result in one additional Democratic seat if they can even accomplish that here in the Free State. In California, isn't there a real concern that if you try to gerrymander too much, you could start losing seats? Because California isn't as clearly and definitively Democratic, I think, blue right now as Texas may have become. And I know it was the other way around. For recent elections, California has tended to be bluer than Texas has been red. But we're seeing that trend really reverse, especially when it comes to Latino voters in both states. So aren't Democrats running a real risk if they become too aggressive in some of these blue states when it comes to redrawing the boundaries?
I think any state that tries to do this is taking a chance. Even Texas, it's not certain that they're going to get exactly what they want. Same with California. It's not an easy thing to do, and it depends on how many states do it too. If we keep going one after another, and Democrats keep, having to fight back whenever the Republicans do it, it's going to get real messy and uncertain.
240-242-5646 agreed with that assessment as well. It's kind of a lot of uncertainty is what you're basically saying at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty. But if Democrats want to maximize their chances, are they going about it? I don't see any concerted strategy. I see a leadership in Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer with no idea what's the right messaging. I see a bright, young, rising star in Zohran Mamdani, who the party is doing everything possible to marginalize and distance itself from, making whatever excuses they can for his success, claiming what plays in Manhattan won't play in Peoria, and won't even endorse him. So if this party isn't doing the most it can to make itself more popular, to embrace populist positions, why should I embrace it? Why should I support it?
Well, they're not at that point yet where they have a very good strategy or very good prospect for doing well. The Democratic leaders, I think, need to be changed. I think Schumer is too old, and the other one is just too weak and not strong enough. So there is some sentiment in the Democratic Party to get younger people, younger candidates, and we'll see, who actually comes out ahead on that. If there's going to be a change, I think a change is needed. And, it doesn't have to be right this minute, but it better happen soon enough.
The New York Times, speaking about we talked about the midterms, but we'll also talk about the 28 election. And I shared this article with you. I think you were also interested in it. It's a conversation. Frank Bruni used to write restaurant reviews Thought he did a really good job with them. He is a good writer, but I think he was better at writing restaurant reviews. Has this essay here where he talks to two other writers where they talk about the Democratic candidates. I was not very impressed with this piece, but I wanted to discuss it because I think it exemplifies a lot of the weaknesses in the New York Times and its political coverage. But before we get to that, Arlen, I wanted your reaction as well. You're less negative towards it. You think it has some real value. Explain.
Well, he's giving us the choices that are out there. He's naming a lot of candidates, potential candidates, and talking about what their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think that's about all he's trying to do. He's not trying to push any particular one or make a endorsement or anything like that. He's just saying, or at least this roundtable are saying, a lot of these are good candidates. They all have possibilities, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. So, that's all I think the article was, is just to introduce a lot of different candidates and just to see what the prospects are out there.
Well, three of the candidates that are mentioned most prominently, and that's why I put them on the thumbnail today, are Christine Todd Whitmer. Christine Whitmer. These are three governors, obviously. Christine Whitmer of Michigan, J.D. Pritzker of, is it J.D. or J.P.? It's J.D., I believe, Pritzker of Illinois, and of course, Gavin of your state, California. Wes Moore is also discussed, but he gets a little less attention than these three, and they came up first. So that's the three I put on the screen. One thing I'll say, my wife's reaction when she saw this was, that Gavin Newsom really is movie star handsome. So I bring that up because obviously it's a good picture. He is a good looking guy. How important is that, if at all, Arlen? Does that matter?
Well, it certainly helps. Somebody like Pritzker is going to have trouble. He doesn't look like the potential presidential nominee. Newsom does, and Newsom is doing some smart things, trying to use his humor to get back at Trump. I mean, his record in California is probably not all that great, but he is coming after Trump and, causing some discomfort, I think, for Trump. So he's doing what he needs to do. And he's certainly a prominent and possible candidate, no question about it.
Do you agree? Well, and the caption there, obviously I put that there, deep bench with 3 question marks. Do you think this is a deep bench in your opinion? Are you impressed with the options at this point that seem to be out there? And of course, I did mention Wes Moore. Apparently, Rahm Emanuel may run. I think he would be an absolutely awful candidate. But what do you think?
Well, the people do name other candidates, kind of more minor at this point, like Senator Gallego in Arizona, John Ossoff in Georgia, Roy Cooper, North Carolina, Graham Plattner is running for Susan Collins' Senate seat in Maine. And, Pete Buttigieg is a possibility.
That Buttigieg was the other one that one of them seems to like. But I got to say, from that list, the 3 that really stood out for me are these 3 plus I think Moore is a legitimate. He's in his second term now. I believe, I guess it's still his first term. I'll answer my own question first, and then I want your response. I don't find these candidates compelling. I don't find them particularly anyone I would really want to vote for. And I was very upset with the way the New York Times, the piece, because it didn't give me reasons. Like you mentioned, Arlen, that Newsom's record in California is mixed. Well, I would have liked to have known from that discussion, what are some aspects of his record that are good? What are some that may not be so good? What will play well? What won't? That's what I would want. If I'm going to read the New York Times now about potential presidential candidates in 3 years, I want to know, what have they done? What are they trying to do? What do they say they'll do? That's what matters to me. That's the only thing, almost the only thing that matters to me. And I didn't get any of that from that piece. But all that said, I think this is in some ways a better crop, for example, than we saw in 24. I thought the choices in 24 were not good. They were very old. meaning Bernie, meaning Warren, meaning Biden. I do not think Buttigieg is in any way qualified to be president. If he wasn't then, he's slightly more now because he was in the Biden cabinet. He still isn't. These are three relatively young, relatively vibrant governors of big, important states. I would say, yeah, if the future potential nominee in 28 is more appealing, probably to more voters than they were in 2020 or 24.
I just think you expect too much of this particular article. It's not meant to say this is the best person, this is the best possible Democratic candidate. This is just one writer who's interviewing other writers who are talking about each of these candidates and who might have a chance, and they named a lot of possibilities. So I think the article did what it was supposed to do, and it may not be what you wanted to do, but I think that's what the writer intended.
Well, I think it is what they intended, and what they were very clear from beginning. What Bruni was very clear is that we face this, existential threat in Donald Trump, and what matters is to defeat him. That's why the stakes are so high. The stakes are so high because we have an autocratic, kleptocratic, erratic, and vengeful president, which I think is all fair. But he won't be in office. I mean, assuming he does step down, hopefully he will. He won't be in office in any case after 28. So that's kind of irrelevant, right? The question is, what are the real problems we face right now, and are they such that the stakes are very high? And I would say the stakes are incredibly high. We have genocide, we have ecocide, we have the worst inequality this country has ever seen, ever. These are terrible, terrible challenges we face that we must address. And I don't know how I can make a decision which of several candidates I might want if I don't know how they plan to address those particular problems.
Yeah, no, you don't. And you got to remember too, we're in 2025. The election won't be till 2028. There's going to be so many things that'll happen between now and then, and a lot of it depends on what Trump does and how people are thinking about Trump, and if he's still as popular, semi-popular as he is now then, and still has the same kind of power. So I think it's really too early to worry. We've got a lot of time, and these people and maybe some others have a chance to introduce themselves to the American people and make their case. And there's something else I wanted to mention when we talk about the 26 midterms. And I know I've said, and other people have said or questioned whether we're even going to have an election in 2026, because if things are looking bad for Trump at that time and the polls aren't good, he could always say, oh, this is a major emergency. This is something we have to postpone the election, or, not have the election at all because there's so much danger out there. That all of that is a possibility, I think.
I agree. It's very, very worrisome. I'm not sure what we can do about that, except try to build huge popular sentiment in support of replacing the Republicans and not having a closely balanced electorate. And the only way I can see doing that is to have a democratic vision that is appealing, that people hear and see, and they decide, this is what I really want. This will make my world better. And that's why I have a huge, and I mean, that kind of points out why I have a problem with the New York Times piece, because nothing in that article gave me reason to hope that by electing any of those candidates, they would make life better for the American people.
Well, first, we're going to hopefully have those 2026 midterms. And if the Democrats could possibly take the House, and or the Senate, then that's going to really slow Trump down. He's going to have a tough time getting his agenda through as easily as he is right now. So, realistically, that's the best chance the Democrats have, is to do well in the 2026 midterms. And then we can start talking about the 2028 presidency.
Arlen, I just want to kind of take issue with something you said, that I want an article in the New York Times, or that I'm calling for an article that tells voters to vote for the candidate that I want. That may be true. I mean, I wouldn't mind if they had, every article was all about how we need to elect, find a Mamdani, or even better, vote for Jill Stein or whoever the Green is. Sure, I would be happy with that. But that's not really what I'm asking for. What I'm asking for is just for the newspaper to lay out their positions on the issues that are most important to the American people, not even what are most important to me. For example, the ecocide is one of the two most important issues to me. I don't think it's as important. The way we respond to the climate catastrophe is important to a lot of Americans. I don't know if it's as important as some of the other issues. But what we do see is that the American public, especially Democrats, have moved very, very far away from the place the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is. Only 8% now of Democrats, you can see the bottom line there, the black line, support what Israel's doing in Gaza. And only a quarter of independents do. So that's a huge divergence between what the Democratic Party policy is, which is to support Israel, and Democratic voters, which is against it. So I think the New York Times would be doing its readers a great, I would say it this way, it's doing its readers a grave disservice by not delving into the positions of those candidates when it comes to Israel, not saying, well, this is what they've said. And other issues. I'm not saying they have to say what I want. Maybe they don't say what I want them to say, but I want at least the paper to discuss it. Similarly, when it comes to Medicare for all, this is an area where the American public are very, very far away from where the party is right now. Here's a YouGov poll. This is the most recent one I could find, July of 25. So if you look at this, 59%, this isn't just Dems, 59% of all adults support Medicare for all. If you look at by race, 84% of blacks, 58% of Hispanics, these are groups that Democrats are losing, especially the youngest voters, all support Medicare for all. Wouldn't it be isn't it the paper doing its readers a disservice by not at least delving into where the candidates stand on that issue? And I'll give you one more, taxing the rich. Most Americans believe the wealthy aren't paying anywhere near their fair share. It's remarkable across the board. 61% of Americans are very frustrated. This is an older one. This is the most recent I could find, 23. 61% feel that Americans don't pay enough in taxes. The richest don't pay enough, the wealthiest, and they are very frustrated. Shouldn't the New York Times at least ask that question? Because these are the issues that the American public care about. They don't care as much about whether Trump is, if someone's tweeting a gotcha tweet. This is what they care about. So shouldn't the paper care about that too? It's what I care about.
Well, Hal, this is nothing new. This has been known for a long time that American people want different things than certainly what the Republicans want in the major parties. And the reason is because the people who have the most money, the rich donors that donate to the senators and representatives, they're the ones that have the power. So they're going to get, what they want. And they've been getting what they want, despite the fact that the American people might want something different. And those statistics prove the American people do want something different. But where are they going to go to find it? That's a big problem. And as far as the New York Times, Again, I repeat, that particular story you're talking about is just one person interviewing some writers. And now I haven't seen the New York Times, in an editorial say this is the candidate we should be fighting for. That may come later on, and they may have good, they could come up with some good reasons to vote for that particular candidate. But you can't expect that from that particular article. And, the New York Times is not giving their point of view at this moment about who they want to see as president.
Yeah, I'll just respond very, very quickly on that because you really answered what I was saying. But again, I'm not asking the paper to endorse anyone. I'm not asking the paper to say this is who we prefer. I'm just asking them to give us the information that I think voters want when they're going to make a decision for whom to vote.
Sure. I mean, their readers should know that. I don't know exactly where it's going to be because, like I say, if it's an editorial that their editorial board says, then you know for sure. But, aside from that, I don't know where you're going to find that kind of information.
Well, the newspaper said that, and Frank Bruni, he opened his piece by saying that the reason this is so important is because Trump is in the White House. The stakes are that high. We must defeat Trump. So his premise is that we need to elect somebody who can defeat Trump. So if that's the case, then again, wouldn't you want to tell your readers the policies that various candidates have so they can decide which one they think is the best one to beat Trump? And I'll before you answer, I want to play this video because I think this is incredibly important. And I've been very critical of AOC, but when I heard this, I thought, well, this is exactly how I feel about why we should be centering policy and we should be straight with the American public.
AOC said during the Democratic National Convention, where she was giving her support to Kamala Harris, she said, and Kamala is working tirelessly towards a ceasefire in Gaza.
And she is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
The reason what AOC did there was so uniquely terrible was not just that it was helping Kamala Harris cover up her own complicity in a genocide, which is bad enough. But I recently, one of the founders of the Uncommitted movement was here in New Orleans talking at Netroots Nation, and said actually that the Uncommitted movement, which was getting lots of people to vote uncommitted in the primaries for Biden because of the genocide, she said they were the friends of the Democratic Party, essentially, because what they were trying to do was warn the Democrats that unless they changed their Gaza policy, they would lose the election. And it was like a friendly warning. It was like, we're going to do this in the primary, not the general election, because we want to give you an opportunity to get better. We're like flashing the signs. So what they were trying to do at that very moment was get the Democratic Party to make concessions on Gaza, to get Biden and Harris to change their policy, to stop supporting a genocide, right? And AOC, as the kind of leading representative of the young millennial left, was in a unique position to exact real concessions because she knew that Kamala Harris needed her endorsement. AOC's endorsement mattered a lot. And so what AOC would have said was, I will not, under any circumstances, support you, Kamala Harris, unless you give in to the demands of the Uncommitted movement. You put a Palestinian speaker on that stage, you meet with the Gazan families, you commit to an arms embargo, and you lay out what your policy on Israel-Palestine will be. And unless you do that, unless you break with this genocide, you won't get my endorsement. And AOC didn't do that. And so it's not only like the immorality of lying, but it's literally like foregoing an opportunity, a unique opportunity that she had as a person because of her power to potentially affect the course of an ongoing genocide.
All right. So I thought that was fascinating, Arlen. I don't know if you have a quick response, but I can explain more if you want. But I'd like your take on that.
Yeah, as usual, I have to defend AOC. Seems like I have to do that every week. I think what she was doing there was campaigning for Kamala Harris. She was trying to help Kamala Harris. If she came up and said, I don't want to support you if you don't do this or you don't do that, that wasn't going to help her at that time. She had a real strong chance of possibly Kamala Harris of winning. And so I think AOC was playing it safe. But I think, everything I've heard about AOC is that she agrees that we have a very bad policy, regarding Gaza and Israel, and she wants to see it change. She thinks that, we're giving too much support. So she's made her position clear. But I think at that time, she was just campaigning, for
what
Kamala
Nathan
Harris.
Robinson is saying is that before the convention, maybe a month before or whatever, she should have gone to Harris and said, I'm not going to endorse you unless you do this. And by taking that position, there was a chance, maybe Harris would have ignored it, said, forget it, I'm not giving in to you. I'm not going to take the side, the pro-life side. I'm going to take the pro-genocide side. She might have said that. But what Robinson is saying is if AOC had conditioned her endorsement on a change of policy by Harris, Harris might have changed her policy. Not saying she would have, she might have. And if she had changed her policy, she very well might have won the election. So what Robinson is saying is by supporting Harris, by lying on behalf of Harris, AOC made it more likely rather than less that Trump would win. She helped Trump.
Well, if AOC's, number one thing and her most important issue was that particular one, and then maybe she could have said that to Kamala Harris. But I think at that time, she, it was a close race. I think she was just trying to help Kamala Harris. And let's face it, if Kamala, Harris said, well, I'm not going to support Israel anymore and what they're doing, I mean, she would probably lose a lot of people. At that time, there's not a strong sentiment, I think, around the country to criticize.
I don't think that's accurate. The polls showed consistently that Americans were far less supportive of Israel than either party. Both, especially Democratic voters, the base was extremely upset about the policy, the pro-Israel policies that the Harris-Biden administration adopted. So that very much helped Trump, as a matter of fact. And when I saw Chris Van Hollen, I asked him about this. He said he's not sure that that's what cost the Democrats the election. He did not certain, but he said he's seen analysis that do conclude that. But even if it didn't cost, let's say it didn't, what's the harm? The policy was terrible. It should have been changed. Even if, I presume we think politicians should take good positions and take pro-people and pro-humane positions because they're right, not just because they're more popular. In this case, it appears, at least from where I sit, that it would have been more popular for Harris to take a pro-Palestine, anti-Israel position. She would have helped herself. But it also would have been important because it was the right thing to do.
I totally agree with you. It's the right thing to do, but I don't know if it would really make that much difference because, first of all, you've got a lot of Democratic office holders who are not going to vote against Israel or not going to vote against Netanyahu, and there's still a lot of people that won't. So you're going to lose some people under those circumstances. I just don't see a lot of evidence of people really being really upset about what our Israeli policy is. They may say so in a public opinion poll, but I just don't, hear it. I don't see it. I don't see evidence of it. So,
well, do you think Mamdani's win in a city that's a third Jewish, his win in the Democratic primary, where he was the candidate who was most critical of Israel, doesn't that support the theory? Doesn't the fact that Harris did very poorly in Palestinian and Muslim areas of Michigan and other states, doesn't that support the theory that there was a real cost that the Democrats paid by kowtowing to the Zionist AIPAC line?
Well, I like Mamdani. I'd like to see him succeed. I want him to be the, mayor of New York, but I just don't. First of all, New York is totally different than the rest of the country. It's a very, blue state, and they're not. It's not a typical democratic state. So I wouldn't read that much into it, but I think it does indicate that people will go for somebody who's really feels strong about certain issues, and like you, I like Mondani, and I hope he does well. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, Arlen, let's continue. I hope I'm not being unfair to you. I'm trying not to be. If I am, tell me.
No.
Shut up. I saw this guy interviewing Richie Torres, this guy Friedman interviewing Richie Torres. And at one point, Richie Torres was defending, I guess, Israel. And Friedman just said, just shut up. I couldn't believe it. This is to a congressman. I thought it was hilarious. I loved it. But Adam Friedman, yeah, he said, shut up. Or Adam Friedland. Is it Friedland or Friedman? I have to look that up. Do you know? He's a young guy. You may not be familiar with him.
Not familiar with him. I'd like to know what Thomas Friedman is thinking these days. I haven't seen anything from him. He's probably writing some things, but I just haven't found them yet.
He has not been as prominently featured in the New York Times of late either, as I understand it. All right, this story I shared with you, unlike the usual direction, which is where you share with me, and we both had a similar reaction to it. A dark money group, I think they're called Chorus, co-founded by a very, very popular pro-democratic, I think he would call himself a pro-democratic podcaster named Brian Tyler Cohen, helped co-found this, and they are secretly funneling or funding high-profile Democratic influencers with up to $8,000 a month, which is a decent amount. I just want to talk about that amount real quick. They get $8,000 a month, but according to Taylor Lorenz, they have to agree to certain stipulations. They aren't going to mention the money, and they're not going to interview certain politicians unless they get green lighted and this and that. So there's some strings on that money. But before we get to it, some folks are saying that's a lot of money. Others are saying it's not that much. It's $96,000 a year. In this space, I don't make anything. So for me, obviously that's a lot. But my understanding is that if you get $1 million, 1 million subscribers, this is the roundest of numbers. It varies tremendously. You may be on more than one platform. 1 million subscribers, which is great, can average you to about 100,000 a year. So 1 million is very, very high. Now, some people have 20 million subscribers. They're making millions. They really are. You get to 10,000, you're in the $1 million plus range. And the more you have, the more you can sell coffee mugs and t-shirts, and you have speaking engagements and you charge a lot for them, and you go on CNN and you get paid. But just from YouTube alone, 1 million subscribers, which is an awful lot, is about $100,000 in the roundest of numbers. So yes, you're a very successful YouTuber with 1 million subscribers. You have $100,000 income. You just doubled your income. It's significant. That 96,000 means a lot to these content creators. No question about it. It's an enticement. Your thoughts, Arlen, on this?
I have a hard time with these kind of topics, just because the Supreme Court has made it so that there really are no rules as far as maximum amount of money. So yeah, we may get so-and-so millions of dollars, but if there's another Elon Musk out there who wants to put in 500 million, who's going to stop him? Our system is just so messed up and so all about money, and with no restrictions. I just it's hard for me to get behind anything when it comes to that.
I think you're 100% correct. I find this such a dispiriting article because you just don't know when I sort of do. Look, like they name a couple of high profile people in there. I'll give you them. I mentioned Brian Tyler Cohen, also David Pakman. By the way, the podcaster who told Richie Torres to shut up is Adam Friedland, not Friedman, but Friedland, who I really like. I really like Adam Friedland. You watch and you don't know who's paying these people. Are they saying what they're saying because they believe it? It's very, very troubling, Arlen. It's we live in it really contributes to the fraudulent perception that we all have of media. And I think it's, when I was talking about the New York Times, it's the same thing. Those commentators, they know what the editors of the paper want. They know what the publisher wants. They know what may or may not cause advertisers to threaten not to advertise with the paper. And they're going to give the paper what it wants. And that is a perfect example was that Bowie piece where all he does is slam Trump doesn't mention problems with Democratic policies. So I think it's very hard to have a democracy where media is bought and paid for.
I wouldn't call it a democracy. I don't think it's even close to a democracy. When just unlimited money and the rich people have all the power, that's not democracy. And the average American voter, could, vote this way and they could give their $10 or $100, whatever. But it's not going to make a whole lot of difference when ultimately, what's going to matter is, who's got the most money and who do the rich people in the country support.
Yeah. But Democrats can do some things. I mean, I'm not going to totally say they are powerless. They have some ability to change the way the system runs, and they often don't avail themselves of it. So this article, I thought Taylor Lorenz did a good job. There's some things about it I didn't love. Her writing it, I don't think is the best, but hey, she's in Wired and I'm not. And it was very good reporting for sure. Good shoe leather reporting without question. So she points out that the Democrats snubbed several prominent content creators after those creators lightly criticized the administration. This is, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. They had an opportunity to go before millions, because you go on one of these content creators, say a Sam Seed or someone of that nature, who's pro Harris, pro-Democrat, but he will be honest in some instances. He would have criticized her on Gaza. Same thing with Crystal Ball. She would have criticized Harris, but she still endorsed Harris. I think they made a terrible, terrible unforced error by giving the cold shoulder to these YouTubers, Arlen. And you agree, do you not?
All these restrictions just, feel bad to me. I mean, when you have somebody saying, oh, you contribute all your money, but you can't do this, you can't do that. I don't see how anybody could, run that kind of an organization.
Why are the Democrats so thin-skinned that they can't go on and talk to a podcaster or YouTuber and just say, well, I don't agree with you on that policy. I think this is a good policy. That's why I support it. Well,
I'm sure some Democrats will do that, and some, are real careful, and maybe they won't do it. But like I say, the system is just so broken and unfair. It's hard to really make much sense of it, and really hard to see how the Democrats could really get a hold of the kind of money they need to win.
Yeah, I am. Well, they're getting money, right? I mean, these creators are getting money to present a certain Democratic version of events, a certain Democratic funded, funders, because these are people who do apparently support the Democratic Party, and they put real limits. For example, I thought this was very interesting. Pacman, again, one of the most prominent. By the way, he's got well over 3 million subscribers. So if you use my rule of thumb, his income is over 300,000. Glenn Greenwald said he could be making over $1 million. I poo-pooed that at first, but I don't know. Maybe it is, in which case that 100,000 obviously isn't so important, which is what, to him anyway, which is what Greenwald said. He tried to come up with some other explanation. I think Greenwald overstates the income, but maybe not by that much. But if you read some of the limitations from Taylor Lorenz, and as far as I know, no one's disputed, no one's saying this isn't accurate. The people who are, behind this group, Tyler Cohen, Pacman, they've attacked her. They've been really specifically denied some of her claims here. So all bookings with lawmakers and political leaders have to be made through this group, Chorus. That's the entity. creators have to loop chorus in on any independently organized engagements with government officials or political leaders. Now, if you continue through this, one of the creators who said, I'm not going to do it, apparently, or at least didn't get the deal, I don't know, maybe they would have done it, but they didn't get an opportunity, and they're critical of it, said, if I get a Zoran interview, because they're all assuming, and I think with good reason, that this chorus group funded by billionaires would not want a democratic socialist like Zoran Mamdani, especially one who's so critical of Israel, to get elected. If I want to work with a politician, I have to fully collaborate with them, meaning chorus, said one creator who apparently was offered the contract but refused to take it. If I get Zoran, I think they should have identified themselves. If I get Zoran, he wants to do an interview with me, I don't want to give that to them. In other words, I don't want to go to chorus and say, can I interview Zoran? What can I ask him? What can I ask him? And I get that. Now and I think that content creators were absolutely right. And I thought it was very interesting, Arlen, that, and I'll get to the point in a moment about Mamdani, because if you look, and I mentioned Pac-Man being one of the main 3+ million subscribers, it's really gone up, much more so than Sam Cedar. They used to be tied. Cedar's now below 2 million. Pac-Man's well over 3 million. I think his ties to the Democratic Party. He was invited to the White House, interviewed Joe Biden after Harris lost. I thought it was very interesting. Pac-Man has never interviewed Mamdani, despite being urged by. Well, at least he hasn't interviewed him, and he hasn't done any shows except behind a paywall on Mamdani. So it certainly does appear that Pac-Man is following the rules. And he's not giving
really
his viewers what they deserve. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree. No, but I think, I'm just surprised that Pac-Man has 3 million followers, because it seems to me, I remember when he first started and he had hardly anybody. And I guess he's really jumped up quite a bit and made a real success of himself. And good for him. But I think with this particular group, it should be the case of, they should all say the same thing. I will support such and such candidate. And without all these restrictions and things like that, that just complicates things an awful lot. And like I said before, Hal, I mean, suppose they come up with $200 million, that's great. It's a lot of money. But if there's Elon Musk in the world who are multi-billionaires and they don't like, what they see, they could change the election on a dime. I mean, that's just the way our system works right now.
Well, that's Pac-Man's argument to a degree. He said, hey, the reason that the Republicans may have won, and the reason why they win some elections, is because they have a much more fully developed media infrastructure. You've talked about this as well. They're all on the same page. We're not. We have a circular firing squad, and now they're coming after me for taking this money. He's saying this is being more organized, having the content creators all kind of speaking the same lingo, making the same case, talking about the same issues, is important for the Democratic Party. So your response to that?
Well, I think the Republicans have a real great head start over the Democrats. They've been, I think, working for decades of working on, media and getting the money to support news sources, radio stations, and, social media, whatever. While the Democrats really haven't. They're just starting to come up with ideas like that particular one we've been talking about, which it sounds very complicated. So, the Democrats really need to look at what the Republicans have done over the last several decades and learn from them and make some changes and not get, tied down with these kind of complicated groups.
Well, what would you recommend? Like, what would you, and see, because my answer is what's good for the Democratic Party may not be good for the American people. I mean, I'm concerned with policy. That's why I was so frustrated with the New York Times article about the candidates, because I just care about policy. I want the policies that I want, and I will vote for candidates who, if I believe they'll pursue those policies. And those are the only candidates I'll vote for. So that's what I want. I don't want, attacks on Trump every single day, but attacks on Trump may be what the Democratic Party, or at least its establishment, its leadership, thinks is best. What do you think would be best, either for the party or for the nation writ large?
Well, just going after Trump exclusively hasn't really worked too well. I mean, Trump still has all that power, and nobody around to stop him. I think Democrats, basically I agree with you on your issues. I mean, I'd like to see those issues emphasized, and I'd like to see the Democratic Party, moving in that direction. Well, and again, that's maybe where we need to have new leadership and younger candidates who can, move in the direction of a progressive agenda, and that would, give the Democrats a better chance, I think, of winning, because like we were talking about just before, Democrats have the issues, the people, like what the Democratic issues is. Just how do we get them to vote for the Democratic candidate?
Let me ask you this. Are you optimistic that there will be new Democratic leadership, and not just new leaders, but different, better, younger isn't, age to me isn't that important. I mean, it is at a point, right? I mean, I think, once you're getting up past the 65 to 70-year-old, and obviously there's variability. Some people who are younger at 75 than others are at 60, but age isn't just a number. It actually is relevant. So I think once you start getting to that 65, 70-year-old range, I'm 62, I feel like I've slowed down. I don't have as much energy as I did when I moved out to California 20 years ago in my early 40s. So I guess my question is, do you see the Democrats embracing a more energetic, perhaps more progressive leadership?
Well, at my age, I'm going to take myself out of the running because I'm apparently too old to become president. So
not for either party, not for either the Democrats or the Republicans, Arlen. Last I checked, you're right within their wheelhouse. I
know, but as to whether I'm confident, whether I think there's a good chance, I just don't know. I mean, I don't see the evidence yet. I think the Democrats have to do a lot more before they're showing me that they could, really match up against the Republicans. So it's just unknown at this point. There's a lot that has to be done and a lot of time before then. So we can only hope, but like you, I like the issues that you're talking about, and the more of those that the Democratic Party can embrace, then I think we'll be in good shape.
So before I let you go and give you your last word, which I will do, one last question. Is the Democratic Party, I'm extremely critical of the party, but to give what I believe its best excuse, is the party at a point where it's damned if it does, it's damned if it doesn't. If it embraces the kind of populist policies and programs that American people really want and that would improve the quality of their lives, they would alienate their donors to such a degree that they would be cut off and they would no longer be able to compete because of the importance of money.
Those are good. It's a good question, Al. Those are good questions, and I don't have any real good answer for them. I just hope that they come around to the kind of policies that you and I like, and and if there's enough, I think there's enough popularity for those kind of programs that things could change, and suddenly the Democrats might get a lot extra support that they didn't have before, but. All this stuff is way too iffy at this point and maybe way too early.
All right, let me give you one of my major reasons for significant pessimism at this point. I do look at Imam Dani and I say, okay, again, this is a guy who, I have my doubts and I have my fears that he will become an AOC. I know you like her better than I do, but that he will basically just toe the party line and follow the direction of the donor class. But right now, I see a guy who campaigned pretty far to the left, who by far the most progressive populist candidate in the race, campaigned against Israel, campaigned against Wall Street, and he won big. And he's exciting people, and he's bringing people into the party who had left the party. And the party's completely trying to expel him. So when I see that, I think there's no hope for this party.
Well, he just might win. I mean, he's got a lot of people behind him. He ran a very energetic campaign. It was, great issues that everybody may not agree with. But, I don't know if there's any polls yet, but I would be surprised if he did win. And I certainly hope he does. And if he could be another AOC type candidate, I think it's a good thing. So, we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
All right, Arlen, last word from you, and then we're going to call it a show.
Let's just call it a show, Hal.
All right, you got nothing. I drew it. I got everything out of him. I squeezed the lemon, the Arlen lemon dry. Arlen, thanks so much for being part of Halitics. I want to thank all viewers, commenters. Please do, by the way, comment. Please do interact in some way, express approval, disapproval, something that you feel about what we're doing here at Halitics, because it definitely helps us beat the algorithm. And I will be back tomorrow. Arlen will be back, I'm hoping, a week from tomorrow.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to vent my feelings and give my views, Hal. I really appreciate it.
Hey, do you hear the music now?
Nope.
All right.